My parents are losers, and I think that's a big reason why I'm a loser too, because I was raised by my loser parents. So, what happens when one loser meets another loser and they have a child together? Well, obviously, the kid's going to grow up to be an even bigger loser than the parents. And that's me. So, in this video, I'm going to be talking about all the different ways that my parents are losers financially, mentally, physically, socially, especially socially. And I'm going to talk about how my parents being losers has resulted in me being an even bigger loser than the both of them combined. My dad was a lifelong factory worker. He started working a general labor factory job pretty early on in his early 20s, and he just never tried to move beyond that. And my mom was a stay at home mother for most of my childhood. Then she ended up getting a degree in social work or something like that after I was already an adult, after she divorced my dad. And since then, she's been a chronic job hopper. And it's not like she's hopping from job to increase her salary. She just goes from one low wage job to another every year or two. And it's always because, according to her, her coworkers or her boss are out to get her, or they treat her unfairly or something. So make of that what you will. But the older I get, the more I realize both of my parents are losers. And I love my parents, by the way. They treat me well enough. They support me, but they are losers. And they made me into a loser too. Whether that's more nature or it's nurture or a combination of both, I'm obviously a huge loser. I'm 36 years old and I work at a car wash and I don't have any friends. I'm pretty cool with one of my coworkers, Jamal, but we only ever hung out outside of work the one time. And, we're just work friends. We're not actually friends. We don't hang out outside of work, so we're not friends. So today, I want to talk about how if your parents are losers, then you pretty much have no chance of not becoming a loser yourself. I'm sure there are people that this doesn't apply to, because there is the whole concept of genetic recombination, which is basically just the idea that, for example, if you had two parents that were both ugly, you might still end up being highly attractive because sometimes it's just kind of unpredictable how two people's DNA are going to combine. But most of the time, a child will end up being a lot like the parents, genetically and socially, for obvious reasons. You share their DNA, and they're the ones that raise you, so usually you're going to end up being a lot like your parents, one way or another. So in my case, both of my parents are financially just very unambitious. My dad got hired to his first factory job in his early 20s, and for whatever reason, he just stuck with that line of work all the way to retirement. That line of work being unskilled labor. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. The world needs people to do those jobs. And in my dad's case, it worked out well enough because he got into it starting in the 80s when the economy was just booming. And back then, even low-paying factory jobs, in the 80s and 90s, even low-paying factory jobs paid enough to support a family. So he was pretty much just coasting until the Great Recession, and then he ended up being unemployed for a year or two. But in the grand scheme of things, even that didn't really matter because he eventually found another job and he worked there for, I don't know, 15 years or something like that, however long it was till he retired. But I just remember every single day he would just go on and on about how miserable he is and how much he hates his job. And he would always complain about how stupid his coworkers were and how much the job sucks. He made it very clear that he hates his work, yet he just kept doing it anyways. And he's not stupid. Like, he's probably intelligent enough that he could have gotten a degree and got a better paying job with better benefits and everything if he had even the slightest amount of ambition. Because keep in mind, he was starting his career in the 80s. So back then, unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure that back then it actually was possible to get a good job just because you had some random bachelor's degree in business administration or whatever. But my dad just apparently, he didn't think about things like, maybe in the future the economy won't be booming out of control. And, maybe he might not be setting the best example for his son. Me. Because the other thing about this, my dad is what you would call a functioning alcoholic. And I think that's probably a big reason why he never cared to try to get out of working these back-breaking factory jobs. Because he would come home from work every day and he would just immediately crack open a cold one. Then he would just keep drinking his natural lights until he fell asleep in his chair watching TV. And when he was off work, like on the weekends, he would usually start drinking around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And it was the same thing, He would drink until he fell asleep watching TV. And he also chain smoked cigarettes the entire time. And he still lives like this, by the way, but he's retired now, so every day is just drinking and smoking all day. Now, socially speaking, my dad does have some friends. Every now and then he might meet up with a friend to watch a football game. And he used to go hunting with his friends pretty regularly during duck season, but he hasn't been hunting for probably 20 years or something like that. And I don't even know why. I guess he'd just rather drink natty lights and rot in his armchair watching reruns of The Office. And that's another weird thing about my dad. You probably wouldn't expect an alcoholic redneck like my dad to be a fan of The Office. But he loves that normie tier TV sitcom slop. And I mean, I like The Office too, but it's always funny hearing my dad talk about it because he'll just randomly be going to grab another beer or whatever during the commercial break. And he'll see me and he'll just be like, that Dwight is just something else. He just tickles me to death. And he'll get this tone of like, he gets genuinely excited and he'll just be like, have you seen the one where they do the CPR training and Dwight cuts the face off the dummy? I about died. I just about died. That's my dude right there. He just tears me up. And by the way, that is nearly a word-for-word conversation. That is really something that my dad said recently. This was just the other day that this happened. But yeah, the biggest loser trait that my dad has is just that he just rots. He just sits there drinking natural light all day, just rotting, watching cable television. I even tried to get him to get Netflix or something instead of cable, but he's always just like, nah, I just like to watch whatever they got on. I don't want to pick it myself. So I guess he just, I don't know. I'm pretty sure what it is my dad, He's definitely a high inhibition guy. Not as bad as I am, but he is on the higher inhibition side of the inhibition spectrum. And you really can't blame him for this because it is a natural way of coping with social anxiety. But I think he just drinks and rots away in front of the TV just to cope. That's just his way of coping with his anxiety. And I think that's also why he never tried to get a better job or anything. He just convinces himself that he doesn't even want to because that's easier than actually having to face his anxiety. And I do understand that. I fully understand that. I'm not blaming him for it, but I do think that I picked up on these things to some degree as I was growing up, and that influenced me. And that's probably at least partially why I myself am so high inhibition. But another thing is that my dad takes antidepressants. He's been on antidepressants as long as I can remember. So it's kind of hard to tell what's actually his natural way of being versus just the way he is when he's zombied out on Zoloft or whatever. But either way, it doesn't really matter because as a kid growing up, I just saw my dad always acting like a loser, and it kind of just made me feel like, that's going to be my position in life. Like, my dad is a low-level factory worker, so that's my caste. My dad just rots, so naturally, I am a Rothschild. Some people are upper-class alphas, their role is to be like the Rothschilds, the doers and makers of society. But me, I'm not a Rothschild, I'm a Rothschild. My dad just rots. So that's my legacy, rotting in front of the TV. That's where I fit in. That's my role. That's my caste. And aside from that, and this is actually the bigger thing that influenced me in my formative years and turned me into such a loser, just seeing how my dad acts in social situations, he's just extraordinarily passive. And maybe this is the antidepressants, but he never really speaks up. He doesn't stand up for himself outside of our family, outside of the household, because he would argue with my mom all day, every day, back when they were still together. So he would stand up against her, but seeing him at a restaurant or something, he's the type of guy, he could order a steak and they bring him a grilled chicken salad and he'd just be like, you know what? I like chicken salad. This is fine. And that's actually not even that bad. I think his passiveness probably did play a role in making me kind of the same way, because I am also very meek and passive. But the worst is when he gets a little bit more drunk than usual. When I drink, it doesn't lower my inhibition at all. But my dad, he gets drunk and all of a sudden he just starts saying some absolutely retarded shit to random people. Like, he'll start hitting on a 20-year-old waitress in a very creepy way, or he'll randomly just talk shit to some random passerbys, but it's always in a way that doesn't even make sense. So people don't even get mad usually, they're just confused. And it's just very cringy, and it's hard to watch, but that's how I've always known my dad to be. He's either just rot-maxing and being a socially awkward, meek, passive pushover, or he's a socially awkward, drunken fool. So whether it's nature or nurture, it doesn't really matter, because I ended up being a very meek, passive, socially anxious person myself, and that is probably largely to blame on the way that my dad is and the example that he set for me. I don't know if I learned that from him or I inherited it genetically, but who cares? It doesn't matter either way. I got it from him. So that's my dad. Unambitious, socially awkward, high inhibition, loser, alcoholic. And again, I do love both of my parents. It's probably their parents' fault that they're losers. So I don't mean this video to be a hit piece on the two people in my life that care about me the most, but I'm just saying all this so you have a little more context on why I am the way I am. Why I'm such a huge loser. And also just to make the point that most losers, or a lot of losers anyways, because for some people it is their own fault, but for a lot of us, we just never even stood a chance because of the way that we were raised. So now let's talk about my mom. My mom is a very extroverted narcissist with zero self-awareness. And she's also stupid. She accepts no responsibility whatsoever for her actions, no matter what it is. And anytime she's forced to face any kind of consequences, she always deflects. It's always somebody else's fault. And it's not even worth arguing with her because if you do back her into a corner with facts and logic, she'll just start crying and talking about how everyone's always out to get her. And, basically, she'll just play the victim. She plays the victim. Now, I don't like to use the K slur because I've noticed that in a lot of the viral videos where some supposed K slur, Karen, is supposedly just being so evil and racist or whatever, at least half the time you see a video like that, the supposed Karen isn't actually doing anything wrong. Like, for example, the time a gang of teenagers tried to hog a rideshare city bike in New York City so nobody else could take it out while they just hung around waiting for their friend or whatever. And the whole world was just super quick to take the side of the downtrodden minority youth when really they were the ones being assholes and the supposed Karen was in the right. She didn't do anything wrong. So I don't like to use the K slur. I know that may be controversial with my audience, but I don't like to use that word because it is commonly used in these low context viral clips in order to paint a person as being in the wrong. And then everyone just accepts that narrative because, the title of the video said she's a Karen, so she must be the one that's wrong. And I'm not down with that. I care about nuance. Call me crazy. I am kind of alone in this these days, I suppose, but I care about nuance. And I don't make snap judgments like that. And I'm just going to say it. The word Karen is a racist slur against white people. So I don't like to use that word. But with that said, my mom is a total Karen. Like anytime we go out to eat, she always, without fail, every single time, she always finds something to complain about with her meal. It's like she just lives to talk down to customer service workers. And another example, one time my mom reversed out of her driveway and she just backed straight into the neighbor's car that was parked on the street. And her neighbor was outside on his porch at the time, so he saw it happen. So instead of getting out of her car and going up to the neighbor and apologizing to the guy, and, just like trying to swap insurance information or whatever, like a normal person would do, my mom immediately jumped out of her car and ran right up to this guy, just yelling and cussing at him, just like, "What the hell are you doing parking there? Blah, 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 blah." She was yelling at the guy as if it was his fault. And his car was parked fine, by the way. It was 100% legal, and it wasn't even like right across from my mom's driveway. She had to pull out at an erratic angle, and, so that's what she did. She pulled out at a weird angle, going too fast, not paying attention, as she usually does. Then she wanted to try to act like it was this other guy's fault for parking his car legally on the street in front of his own house. So my mom is pretty much horrible, and she's a narcissist, and she does okay socially, I guess, because she does always have friends. But the thing is, she never keeps any of her friends for very long. She always ends up having some kind of drama, and then she'll stop being friends with whoever it is that she has drama with. Then she'll make some other friends to replace the ones that she lost, and rinse and repeat, which is actually the same exact thing that she does with jobs. It's a never-ending cycle of manufacturing drama, playing the victim, quitting her job or quitting a friendship, and then getting a new job or replacing the friend. So, in my opinion, that does make her a loser socially. And the effects it has had on me being raised by this narcissistic loser that my mother is, well, there's a lot. And none of it is good. For one thing, I'm pretty sure that her behavior is a big part of why I have such horrible social anxiety, because she's very overbearing. So growing up as a kid, she would always speak for me whenever she had the opportunity. So that made it so that I never really got the chance to socialize for myself. So I didn't get to practice socializing. And she was always very quick to criticize me for anything I said. No matter what I said as a kid, she would always just laugh at me, and she would say that I have no common sense. That's her favorite phrase that she's always used to categorize me. He has no common sense. That boy has no common sense. And she'll tell it straight to my face. She always, even today, she always will tell me, almost a daily basis, that I have no common sense. And she would even tell people that right in front of me. She would say to other people that I have no common sense, insulting me, basically. I mean, I take it as an insult. And I've made it very clear to her that I don't agree with that, and I take that as an insult. But she, even when I was a little kid, she would say that to people, tell them that I have no common sense, right in front of me, when I'm right there listening. And it's like, how much common sense do you expect me to have as an 8-year-old? You freaking moron. And I know there's a chance that she's listening to this right now. So, Mom, if you are listening to this and it makes you upset to hear these things, just know you've been had it coming. You talk trash about me my entire life right in front of my face, okay? So I think I deserve to talk some truth in front of yours. She probably won't be listening to this, but yeah, like I even remember on more than one occasion, 2 times in particular, when I was a kid. So I wet the bed for a little bit too long. It wasn't really a huge problem, but I would occasionally wet the bed up to like when I was in like the 3rd grade, maybe. And obviously, I was super embarrassed about it. It's not something I wanted to know. I didn't want anybody to know about it, obviously. Well, there was 2 times that I can remember. One time was at school when she came to pick me up. This was either in 2nd or 3rd grade. So my mom was talking to another mom in the hallway, and I was standing right there. And she started telling this woman all about my bedwetting problem. And as soon as she started, I immediately protested. I pulled on my mom's shirt and I was like, "Mom, don't tell people about that." And she was just very dismissive. She was just like, "Oh, don't be silly. She doesn't care about that. Don't worry about it." And then she just went on talking about it. Talking about my most embarrassing problem. And I tried again, like, "Mom, stop talking about that." And you want to know what she did? She said, "If it bothers you, then go away. You don't have to listen to our conversation." So you can imagine just the intense betrayal I felt in that moment. For her to dismiss my feelings by telling me that the random woman that she's telling about all my issues, to say that this random woman doesn't care, so I shouldn't be worried about it. In what universe is that even relevant? I care. I care, Mom. Me, your son. The little boy you're supposed to be protecting? The little boy that trusts you unconditionally? Did you ever stop to consider that maybe I don't want to be humiliated in front of strangers? Did you ever consider that? Well, no, she didn't consider that. She never considers how her actions affect other people. All she cares about is how she feels in the moment. To say that my mother is inconsiderate would be a massive, massive understatement. She's a narcissist, and she's very considerate of her own feelings. But for me, the vulnerable child she's meant to protect, the human life that she brought into existence, who had no say in the matter himself, she has no consideration for me, and she never has. But I don't know. I guess that might be a bit off topic. But the point is, my mom is a loser. She lacks the basic capacity for actually caring about any other human being on this planet, and as a result, she can never maintain any relationship long term. It's amazing my dad stayed with her as long as he did, because my parents didn't get divorced till I was like 17, I think. So they were married for probably about 20 years. But yeah, as an impressionable little boy growing up, these are the people that I had to model my personality after. An alcoholic factory worker with depression and social anxiety who would randomly have cringe outbursts in public, and a raging, inconsiderate, narcissistic Karen. And I don't even like to use that word, but that's the best word there is to describe her. But as a kid, it's a no-brainer that you're going to end up being a lot like your parents in one way or another, because when you're in your formative years, you're basically like a sponge. So whoever it is that you spend the most time around, that is going to influence your personality. You're naturally going to mimic your parents' mannerisms and just everything about them and their personalities. Obviously, you will also be influenced by other people in your life, especially as you get older. You start to become more influenced by your peers and maybe even like celebrities and stuff. But those early years, those are the most important. There's a reason they call those the formative years. And for me, and I think for most people, if you have loser parents, their natural ways of being, all the things about them that make them losers, that's going to influence your development. Some of those loser qualities are going to rub off on you. You will absorb it. It's just bound to happen. And again, I know I keep saying this, but I do love my parents. For all their faults, they have always took care of me pretty well, and they support me even now as an adult in my 30s. So, I can't hate on them too much, but it is kind of their fault that I'm like this. I mean, it's not just kind of their fault, it's a lot their fault that I'm like this. And even just from the standpoint of them passing on their sub-5 DNA to make a child together, like, I know genetics can be kind of unpredictable sometimes, but my dad has a weird shaped head, and he went bald at a very early age, so that should have been something he considered before passing those genetics on to me. But, I mean, I guess he probably didn't even realize how bad it actually is, because he was able to get with my mom, since that was back in the 80s, before the internet allowed women to expand their dating pool outside of their immediate social circles. And by the way, since my parents split up almost 20 years ago, my dad has not so much as been on one single date. He's an inkwell basically himself. He has a lot in common with me, actually, these days. Meanwhile, my fat, wrinkly hag mother, who is ugly on the inside and out, she has no trouble dating whatsoever. She's dated dozens of guys since the divorce. Mostly losers that she meets online, although I think she, by now, mostly has stopped dating. But yeah, my parents are losers. They passed on their horrible, physically repulsive, mentally troubled DNA to me, and then on top of that, they set just the absolute worst example for me for how to behave as a human being living in this clown society. And so here I am, 36 years old, no friends, severely underemployed. I do have a girlfriend for the first time in my life. So, I do have something positive in my life, but that is in spite of who I am, not because of it. And honestly, it feels like it's probably not going to last much longer. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just my anxiety, but it feels like she's been acting more distant the past couple days. But maybe I'll make a video about that. I'm not going to be talking about it right now. But I'm a loser, and I have loser parents. And as I was growing up, my parents were losers back then. They've always been losers. And that's why I never stood a chance. And I'm a major loser myself. I actually, I also meant to talk about how my parents are financially retarded. My mom has like insane credit card debt. My dad also has had in the past insane credit card debt. And he has a problem where I think he's mostly gotten better, but he did have this problem for a while where he just got this idea in his head that he was going to get rich by buying antiques and random things on eBay and then reselling them also on eBay for a profit. And he thought he was going to make a lot of money like that. So what ended up happening was he just filled up his house with a bunch of random crap. And the vast majority of it, he never even sold it, because I guess that was too much work for him. That would cut into his watching The Office time. And he did sell a few of the things, but he literally never sold even one thing for a profit. He sold everything at a loss. And yeah, he's just financially retarded. And so was my mom. When they were still together, they ended up filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy, whatever you call it, when you file bankruptcy as a person, or I guess maybe they filed it jointly as a married couple or something. I don't really know how it works, because I've never personally myself had to file bankruptcy, but that's what they did, because they always wanted to spend more money than they earned, which wasn't that much. So that's just another aspect of how my parents are total losers. I don't know. My parents are losers. I'm a loser. I'm a bigger loser than either of them. I'm a bigger loser than both of them combined. And I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about my theory that if your parents are losers, that means you have a very high chance of being a loser. But I'm pretty sure, it makes sense. If your parents aren't losers, then you would probably learn things from them about, how to effectively win friends and influence people, so to speak. But if you have parents that are losers, like my parents, what chance did I have? They never taught me. It's not just, what you learn, what you're taught by your parents explicitly, but it's just watching them interact with people and interact with systems in the world around them. Like, for example, how they interact, with like credit cards and stuff like that. Like, it's just everything I learned about the way to be, about how you operate in this world as an adult. It was all wrong. Everything was the wrong lesson. And I learned all this just basically through osmosis, just learning by example, just watching how my parents do things. And obviously, as a child in my formative years, I don't know that everything they're doing is wrong. I didn't have any concept of that. It wasn't until I got, maybe in my teenage years where I really started to realize, like, oh, my parents, they're kind of losers. They're losers. People don't really like them. People really don't like my parents that much. And there's a reason for that. It's because of how they are. It's because of who they are. It's because of the things they do and the things that they say and how they are. So my parents are losers. I'm a loser. It is what it is. I do finally have a good thing going with the Indian girl. And I don't know if I've got a couple comments so far. People tell me, you're just going to keep calling your girlfriend the Indian girl. But yeah, because obviously I'm not going to say her actual name on here, but it's whatever. I've already been calling her that in probably 10 videos so far, whatever, or however many. So I'm just going to stick with that for now. Maybe eventually, if she doesn't break up with me before the next month or so, knock on wood, maybe we'll find a nickname for her to use on this channel. But for now, she's just going to be called the Indian girl. And I'm a huge freaking loser because of my parents. partially because of them. I'm sure some of it is just my own fault. I might be that type of guy that could have had very successful non-loser parents and still ended up being a loser due to my own actions. I mean, well, that doesn't even really make sense. You know, that wouldn't be me. If I had different parents, that'd be a different person. So if you want to help me out, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you really want, or don't. You know, you don't have to do any of this, but thank you for watching.